It is said that some inheritances are not passed down through blood, but through fear. In the shadows of memory, in the things a family never fully forgets. Long before Ray Bradbury was born, before space travel, before books that burn, before eternal summers trapped inside glass bottles, there was a name suspended in time, marked by suspicion, by collective fear, by a forbidden word: witch. Mary Bradbury was accused, tried, and sentenced during the Salem witch trials in 1692. Although she managed to escape execution, the fear remained in the family for generations. Ray Bradbury, one of her descendants, grew up looking at fire with a mixture of fascination and terror, as if, somehow, he were remembering something he had never lived through. In Fahrenheit 451, fire does not simply destroy books. It purges, erases, silences, just as those trials did centuries earlier. As if Bradbury, consciously or not, were rewriting an ancient wound, transforming the persecution of a woman accused of witchcraft into the persecution of millions of minds daring to think. Ray Bradbury did not merely write stories. He built worlds that seemed to breathe on their own. Labyrinths where fear, nostalgia, and obsession intertwined into an unsettling tapestry. And at the center of all those worlds, there was always something burning. Not always visible, not always literal, but present, persistent, like a heartbeat. Fire as punishment, as cleansing, and as warning. Ray Douglas Bradbury was born on August 22, 1920, in Waukegan, Illinois, USA. He grew up in a humble household during the Great Depression. Bradbury was not an ordinary child. He read compulsively. He spent hours devouring science fiction, adventure, horror, and fantasy books. Authors such as Edgar Allan Poe, H.G. Wells, and Jules Verne became his invisible mentors. His family faced severe financial hardship. They moved several times before finally settling in Los Angeles in 1934. This change was decisive. There, Bradbury came into contact with the world of cinema, Hollywood studios, and a completely different culture. He spent hours watching horror and science fiction films, and it was then that he understood fear could be beautiful, aesthetic, almost poetic. Since his family could not afford college, Bradbury made the decision to educate himself. He spent entire days in public libraries. For years, he wrote relentlessly, but without success. To survive, he sold newspapers on the street, and at night he devoted himself to writing with relentless consistency. It was a decisive stage because it forged his discipline. Bradbury did not believe in inspiration as a magical act, but in daily perseverance. At first, he faced rejection after rejection. He sent out stories, and they came back. He rewrote them, and they were rejected again, over and over. During this period, he met Forrest J. Ackerman, a key figure in the science fiction world, who introduced him to circles of writers and fans. Thanks to that environment, Bradbury began to understand that he was not alone, that there was a whole community obsessed with the same themes: space, time, the unknown. His first major sale came in 1941 with the short story Pendulum, co-written with Henry Hasser and published in Super Science Stories. It was not a huge success, but it was a crack in the wall, a sign that he could get in. From that point on, he entered a period of almost frantic productivity. He sold stories to magazines such as Weird Tales, Amazing Stories, and Planet Stories. The pay was low, sometimes only a few dollars, but each publication was a form of validation. Still, Bradbury never fully fit the pulp mold. While other writers focused on action, technology, or monsters, he wrote about loneliness, nostalgia, intimate fear, childhood, and death. His stories were slower, more atmospheric, more human. In 1947, he published his first major collection, Dark Carnival, a compilation of 27 stories, many of them born in the pulp era. Here, his voice already emerges clearly. Dark carnivals, children confronting the inexplicable, and a constant blend of horror and melancholy. Some became highly influential and were later adapted for film and television. The Homecoming was one of the most famous and remembered. It tells the story of a family of supernatural beings seen through the eyes of the only human member, a boy who fears he does not belong. While everyone else celebrates the strange as something natural, he faces the deepest fear of all, being the only one who does not fit in, and being forgotten by time. Here, Bradbury transforms classic horror into something intimate and emotional. The monsters do not frighten. They humanize the fear of difference and the passage of time, one of his central obsessions. In The Jar, a man buys a mysterious jar containing something indefinable. Soon, the entire town becomes obsessed with its contents, projecting onto it their own fears and desires, until reality and imagination begin to blur dangerously. Bradbury demonstrates his talent for collective psychological horror, where the true terror lies not in the object, but in the human mind and its need to find meaning. Skeleton tells the story of a man who develops a sickening obsession with his own skeleton, feeling it as a foreign entity trapped inside his body. As his paranoia grows, the line between the physical and the mental disintegrates. Here, Bradbury turns the ordinary into a nightmare, anticipating his more psychological style. The Crowd tells the story of a man who survives a car accident and begins to recognize the same faces appearing at different tragedies. Convinced that a mysterious crowd gathers every time someone is about to die, he starts investigating a conspiracy that seems impossible to prove. In The Small Assassin, a mother begins to suspect that her own baby is trying to kill her. What first seems like postpartum paranoia gradually turns into a growing nightmare, where maternal instinct collides with a primal and inexplicable fear. It is one of his most disturbing stories. Bradbury takes something sacred, motherhood, and turns it into horror, exploring fears no one wants to admit. That same year, Bradbury married Marguerite McClure, who would become his lifelong companion and the mother of his 4 daughters. Maggie worked in a bookstore and was a fundamental source of support. In fact, she was the one who believed in him when no one else did. For many years, Maggie was the family's financial backbone while Bradbury wrote.
I always have Maggie go over everything I write, word by word. She taught English in college, and I rely on her to correct my grammar and catch any other errors I might have missed. It's always hard for me to decide when a manuscript's really ready to go out. Usually, if we can't change another word, that's when it's ready, not before.
During those years, he also met writer Lee Brackett, who introduced him to more serious literary circles, teaching him how to professionalize his craft and sell his stories more effectively. He began publishing in more prominent outlets such as the Saturday Evening Post and Collier's, reaching a much wider audience. He was also deeply inspired by radio, especially programs by Norman Corwin, a highly influential radio writer who adapted literary texts and created original stories rich in emotional and philosophical depth. Little by little, Bradbury began leaving behind stories built on immediate impact and superficial monsters, and started looking inward. His writing became slower, more poetic, more unsettling. He was no longer interested only in frightening readers, but in understanding them. Some stories about Mars, which he had been writing separately, began to connect with one another, forming a larger whole. This led to the Martian Chronicles in 1950. Not as a traditional novel, but as a constellation of stories united by a shared obsession, loneliness, memory, and the inevitable repetition of human mistakes. This collection, made up of between 26 and 28 short stories, firmly placed Bradbury on the literary map. From the very moment a rocket lifts off in rocket summer, melting an Ohio winter with its heat, we sense that this is not just science fiction, but a world where human emotion and wonder blend seamlessly with the everyday. Bradbury shows us that Mars is not merely a distant planet, but a mirror that alters our perceptions, where every action resonates with the weight of nostalgia and memory. That same opening image was later recreated in the 1980 television miniseries, serving as a visual portal into what was to come. In Illa, we meet a Martian woman who dreams of the arrival of humans. Her husband watches her with jealousy, fear, and incomprehension. Here, Bradbury displays his gift for psychology, intimate tension, and silent tragedy, the kind that arises when cultures, memories, and desires collide. The tragedy deepens in And the Moon Be Still as Bright, when humans encounter the last Martians and confront the devastation they have brought with them. Here, Bradbury unveils his social criticism beneath the veil of fantasy. Mars becomes a reflection of greed, arrogance, and the inevitable repetition of human errors. In The Fire Balloons, Martians ascend into the sky in sacred balloons of fire, a ritual misunderstood by the colonists. Bradbury transforms ceremony into poetry, where beauty and the unknown inspire both fascination and fear. And toward the end, in The Million-Year Picnic, a human family flees to Mars after Earth's destruction. There, they find a new beginning, but also the weight of what has been lost forever. Bradbury closes the work with one of his recurring themes: hope and tragedy intertwined, the cycle of destruction and rebirth, and the emotional burden of memory. The Martian Chronicles brought him immediate fame and critical recognition. It also motivated him to keep writing relentlessly, sometimes 4 or 5 hours every single day, to refine his technique of creating stories connected through a larger narrative framework. In 1951, he published The Illustrated Man, a collection of 18 stories linked by the image of a man covered in living tattoos. Each story unfolding on his skin becomes an unsettling reflection of ourselves.
We are the tension-collecting animals of this world. We are that particular creature in the world who decides to put away violence most of the time. We are the only creature in the world that does this. Every other animal acts in the instant to destroy or run from destruction. We choose not to do so. So I, as a writer, come along and try to help you to cry at the right time. We save up a tension of laughter, perhaps for our silly politicians. I come along as a writer and help you to laugh. So I come along with a story and enable you for an hour to murder, so that the next day you don't have to do it in reality.
Among its standout stories is The Veldt, in which a futuristic house responds to children's desires, and those desires turn deadly. Bradbury shows us how technology can amplify the worst parts of human nature, and how imagination and fear can merge until they become violence. Then there is Kaleidoscope, where astronauts drift through the emptiness of space, facing death while remembering their lives in an endless instant. Here, the vastness of the universe becomes a mirror of human loneliness and despair, a place where every thought, every memory becomes a final reflection of the life left behind. The Last Night of the World captures a moment of calm before the end. A couple knows it will be Earth's final night. Bradbury turns the apocalypse into poetry and intimate reflection, showing how human beings can face fate with serenity, meeting the end with contemplative eyes. Television and film adaptations preserve the melancholy and quiet unease of his storytelling. After The Illustrated Man, Bradbury worked frantically on his next novel, using a rented typewriter in the basement of a library. He paid 10 cents for every half hour. He did not own a typewriter and lived with the constant fear of not finishing the book. Every page was an urgent message, a warning to humanity about the loss of critical thought. It was the 1950s, and McCarthyism and growing censorship deeply disturbed him. He watched mass society take shape, television emerge as a new god, and consumerism begin to shape the minds of ordinary people. His love for books and libraries led him to imagine a world in which the written word was forbidden, condemned to burn in flames that were both metaphorical and real. A world where fire does not merely consume paper, but erases memory, purges thought, and destroys history. In every spark echoed the shadows of an older past, the trials and persecutions that had once marked Mary Bradbury, leaving a trail of fear embedded deep within his subconscious. In early 1953, he published the work that would make him a legend, Fahrenheit 451. The novel places us in a dystopian future where books are banned, and firemen do not put out fires. they start them, burning any text that might encourage critical thought or reflection. Guy Montag is one of these firemen. At first, he accepts his role without question, but as he begins to observe the world around him and meet people who think and feel differently, he starts to doubt both authority and the society that surrounds him. Montag discovers that censorship does not only burn pages, it also destroys memory, imagination, and consciousness. His inner conflict leads him to rebel, seeking knowledge, literature, and personal freedom in a world that punishes curiosity and rewards conformity.
My character Montag is myself, discovering me. Really, there are those sides of our character which are destructive, and you bring them out of the open, and then you find ways of becoming creative. So the character of Montag is a totalitarian who discovers he's burning and not just books, but ideas. And then he sets out in search of rediscovering himself and discovering how to read and how to be alive through reading. And then he gives up his profession and becomes a destroyer of the destroyers.
Seen from today's perspective, many elements of Fahrenheit 451 feel disturbingly prophetic. In the novel, Bradbury described with striking precision cultural, technological, and social trends that now feel familiar. Homes dominated by massive immersive screens, devices that do not merely entertain, but replace conversation, introspection, and thought. In Montag's world, control is exercised through the suppression of ideas, the rewriting of history, and the manipulation of knowledge, a vision that anticipated censorship in media and digital spaces, information distortion driven by governments or corporations, and the rise of narratives designed to shape public opinion. A world where people no longer need to be constantly watched, because they have learned to watch themselves. And at the center of it all, fire, as a symbol of cultural erasure, the destruction of knowledge, the loss of memory, and the erosion of collective identity. Bradbury understood that a society does not need wars to disappear. It only needs to stop reading, remembering, and thinking.
People are always saying, what do you predict for the future? You're writing these depressing books. I don't mean to depress. I mean to use my books as weapons to prevent futures rather than to predict them. I'm optimistic about the future, or I wouldn't be writing the way I write. If I really believed the future was going to be as dark as Orwell said or Aldous Huxley said, I would tomorrow go out and eat a ton of pickles and 13 Cadburys and get the hell out of the world.
The work has inspired countless adaptations in film, television, and theatre, including Fahrenheit 451 by François Truffaut in 1966. The director deeply admired Ray Bradbury, and although there were creative differences, their relationship remained respectful and helped bring his work to international cinema. That same year, he published The Golden Apples of the Sun, a collection of 22 short stories that includes A Sound of Thunder. A tourist trip to the past to hunt dinosaurs turns into a nightmare when a small mistake irreversibly alters the present. The story popularized the idea of the butterfly effect, one of the most influential concepts in modern science fiction. It is one of Bradbury's most frequently adapted stories for film, TV, and radio, and a landmark in time travel fiction. The foghorn, a prehistoric creature, emerges from the ocean, drawn by the lonely sound of a lighthouse, searching for something that no longer exists. The story stands out more for its melancholy and humanity than for horror. It directly inspired The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, showing Bradbury's influence on monster cinema. The Pedestrian. In a silent city where nights are ruled by the glow of screens and the movement of autonomous vehicles, Leonard Mead goes out for a walk as he does every night. Walking without purpose, without screens, without consumption, does not fit the logic of that society, and for that reason, he is considered dangerous. The inspiration for this story came from a real anecdote.
I was walking with a friend, this is about 30 years back, and a police car pulled up, and the policeman got out and came over to us and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Putting one foot in front of the other," which was the wrong answer. And the more the policeman talked to me, the more upset I got, because I felt I wasn't a criminal, I had done nothing. And I looked around suddenly and I realized how great a distance it was toward the west with no pedestrians and toward the east with no one walking. We were isolated. And the more I talked, the more I realized I was making trouble for myself. At a certain point, I reached into my pocket and took out a packet of soda crackers and put them in my mouth and chewed on them. And as I talked to the policeman, I sprayed him with flakes. And the policeman looked down at the flakes on his uniform, and he looked like the night sky with the Andromeda Nebula here and Orion over here. And he couldn't decide whether I was being hostile or not.
In 1957, he published Dandelion Wine, a novel inspired by his own childhood. The story follows Douglas Spaulding, a 12-year-old boy, during a summer full of discoveries, joys, and small tragedies. It is not a linear adventure story, but a series of memories and experiences that portray the magic of childhood, nostalgia, and sensitivity to everyday life.
Douglas Spaulding is most definitely me. A boy who grew up in a small Midwestern town, northern Illinois, very much loved his grandparents, loved the summer days and running through them, loved making dandelion wine with his grandfather. So all of that I've gathered up over the years and put in books like Dandelion Wine.
In 1959, he published A Medicine for Melancholy, a collection of 22 stories ranging from the fantastic and realistic to the deeply human. Among them, In a Season of Calm Weather, a painter walks along the beach on a perfect summer day and, carried by memories and reflections, feels the world fading and being reborn with every step. It is one of the most poetic stories in the collection and was adapted into a film as The Picasso Summer, 1969. The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit. 5 modest men buy a marvelous white suit that promises to change their lives, at least for a day. It blends light fantasy with social commentary. Bradbury not only imagines impossible dreams, but also how those dreams reflect human aspirations, insecurities, and hopes. This story was adapted into a film in 1998, demonstrating its lasting appeal and its more optimistic tone within the collection. In 1962, he published Something Wicked This Way Comes. The novel tells the story of 2 friends, Jim Nightshade and Will Halloway, who live in the small town of Greentown, Illinois. A mysterious carnival arrives in the night, bringing strange and dangerous attractions. A carousel that can age or rejuvenate those who ride it. A mirror that reflects dark desires. And a sinister ringmaster, Mr. Dark, who can manipulate the deepest fears and secrets of the townspeople. Bradbury drew inspiration from his childhood in Waukegan and from the atmosphere of small American towns. He wanted to capture the simultaneous wonder and terror that can coexist in a child's memory, using the carnival as a metaphor for temptation and moral corruption.
When I was 11 and 12, Carnival used to come through our town every Labor Day weekend for 3 or 4 days. There was a man called Mr. Electrico who told me he was a defrocked Presbyterian minister. He used to sit in an electric chair in the Carnival every night, and they'd throw on 100 million volts of electricity, and his hair would stand up in a marvelous shock over his head. And as a result of his impact on my life,
Something Wicked This Way Comes became one of Bradbury's most emblematic works outside strict science fiction. It has been adapted for film, television, and theatre, including the 1983 television film. The story inspired writers and filmmakers who combine the fantastic with the unsettling in everyday settings, anticipating later trends in horror and fantasy aimed at both young and adult audiences.
This is one of my favorite books, mainly because I found my father by surprise in it a few years ago. My father died some 23 years back. I wrote the book 20 years ago, published it 18 years ago, didn't read it for many years after. One night about 8 or 9 years ago, prowling around my house late, picked up the book, read a whole chapter about this man, this father in the book, and burst into tears. It was my father, hidden away at the heart of the book, very special, very loving, very good. And that's why it's my favorite book.
In 1964 came The Machineries of Joy. The book is built from stories written over several years, gathered under a common idea: the search for joy in an increasingly mechanized, faster, and emotionally disconnected world. It was the heart of the 1960s. Technological progress, the space race, and consumer culture were booming. Curiously, Bradbury had a contradictory relationship with technology. He never learned to drive. He preferred walking or taking public transportation. He also avoided computers for most of his life, preferring typewriters instead. This fed one of the most curious myths about him, that he was a writer of the future, trapped in the past.
Eagle looking great. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
On July 20th, 1969, humans landed on the moon during Apollo 11 moon landing, and Bradbury was invited to speak on television because his works had inspired generations of scientists and explorers.
In London, Mike Wallace spoke with one of the most visionary and perhaps poetic of the breed, the author of the Martian Chronicles.
Some people suggest that the very fact that we have now gone into space and have been on the other side of the moon, that proves that there is no God up there.
I believe firmly that we are God himself coming awake in the universe. We exist on a very strange world that we know nothing about. Our theologians have tried to help us understand this. Our scientists have tried to help us understand this. We know nothing. Because when we move out into the mystery, when we move out into the loneliness of space, when we begin to discover we really are 3 billion lonely people on a small world, I think it's going to draw us much closer together.
In November 1971, the spacecraft Mariner 9 entered orbit around Mars, and NASA invited him to the symposium, Mars and the Mind of Man. While NASA was sending probes, maps, and photographs, Bradbury had been taking millions of people to Mars through imagination for decades.
I don't know what in hell I'm doing here. I'm the least scientific of all the people up on the platform here today. 9-year-old boys are always finding me out. A 10-year-old boy a few years ago ran up to me and said, "Is that Mr. Bradbury?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That book of yours, the Martian Chronicles?" I said, "Yes." He says, "On page 92, I said, he says, where you have the moons of Mars rising in the east?" I say, "Yes." He said, "No."
In 1972, he published The Halloween Tree. The novel follows a group of children on Halloween night who, noticing the strange absence of their friend Pipkin, set out on a journey guided by an enigmatic figure, Mr. Mound Shroud. Throughout the story, the children travel through time and across cultures, ancient Egypt, the Middle Ages, Celtic traditions, discovering the origins of Halloween and, more deeply, humanity's relationship with death. The book was also conceived as a project connected to animation and television, which explains its episodic structure. Later, Bradbury himself adapted the story into an animated film. By the mid-1980s, Bradbury was already a world-renowned author, celebrated for his ability to build worlds blending nostalgia, fear, and poetry. Television offered the perfect space to explore short fiction, and Bradbury, who had already worked on film and television scripts, saw the opportunity to bring his stories to a wider audience without sacrificing the poetic and dark voice that defined him.
People ask, where do you get your ideas? Well, right here. I just look around, find what I need, and begin. I'm Ray Bradbury, and this is...
The Ray Bradbury Theatre premiered in 1985 and ran until 1992, across multiple channels and countries, producing a total of 65 episodes over 6 seasons. Bradbury agreed to make the series on the condition that he retain creative control, something unusual in television. He was actively involved, writing many of the scripts and supervising the tone. That is why it remains one of the most faithful adaptations of his original style. The series popularized his short stories and influenced science fiction and horror television, proving that it was possible to create a literary quality anthology series focused more on atmosphere and psychology than on special effects. It set a precedent for later shows such as Tales from the Crypt and Masters of Horror, where story and idea matter more than spectacle.
I don't think life is worth living unless you're doing something you love completely, so that you get out of bed in the morning and want to rush to do it. If you're doing something mediocre, if you're doing something to fill in time, life really isn't worth living. I can't understand people not living at the top of their emotions constantly, living with their enthusiasms, living with some sense of joy, some sense of creativity. I don't care on how small a level it is. If you're a mathematician and love figures, great. I don't care what field it is, though.
After decades exploring imaginary worlds, in the 1980s, Bradbury entered a period of deep introspection. He wanted to confront a more intimate fear, the kind that beats inside cities, homes, and the human mind. This gave rise to Death is a Lonely Business in 1985, a mystery and crime novel in which loneliness and memory intertwine in a small coastal town in California. 5 years later, with A Graveyard for Lunatics, Bradbury brought that same melancholy to the Hollywood of his youth. Among movie studios and abandoned mansions, the crimes become a pretext for exploring obsession, nostalgia, and solitude. That same decade, Bradbury conceived Let's All Kill Constance, although it would not be officially published until 2002, continuing his exploration of Hollywood mysteries. Finally, in 2006, he published Farewell Summer, his final novel. It is a continuation of Dandelion Wine. Here, Douglas Spaulding relives the summer of his youth, confronting the fleeting nature of time and the inevitable arrival of life's winter. Memory and melancholy, the passage of time, and the fragile beauty of childhood become the true protagonists. Ray Bradbury died on June 5, 2012, at the age of 91. He left behind more than 600 short stories, in addition to novels, essays, and screenplays. From the Salem witch trials to the final page of Farewell Summer, his life and work remind us that fire can either purge or illuminate, that memory endures, that fears can be inherited, and that literature can become a bridge between past and future.
Everything has been an accident. Everything has been unplanned. Everything has been a passion, a madness, a great love. I've had fun all of my life. I've never worked a day in my life. And each of my books is a special love. I have no one that's above the others. All these things are a reward for me now, and it's wonderful. But thank God I behaved unconsciously and didn't try to intellectualize my career. Just me and the typewriter and the future.